Very nice to see you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for answering some questions. What do you think of when you see the moon in the sky now?
I don't really think much about the moon anymore. You have to remember it's 48 years ago. And in my mind, it's a little like going to a movie. And then when you come out, you're back in the real world and you think about the movie. And as time goes on, many of the things about the movie become kind of in the background. But you remember the high points of the movie. And I think years later, you still remember some of those. And the moon's the same way. I don't think much about the moon. I don't call up images of specific things that I saw on the moon, but some of the larger features and some of the absolutely incredible features there are on the moon keep coming back to mind. And it's not like it's fresh in my mind, but my memory is pretty good when it comes to certain things on the moon. But looking at the moon up in the sky at night, I don't think much about it anymore.
Having been the person who was furthest removed from any other human, what lessons could you offer to the people who are going to travel to Mars and on further journeys for their distance from humanity?
Well, my response to that is patience, patience, patience. It was wonderful being by myself there for 3 days. I was very happy to fly that spacecraft by myself while they were down on the surface. I did a lot of work. I only slept about 4 hours a night. Had a lot of science, a lot of photography to do, a lot of visual observations to make. You know, one of the visual observations that I made resulted in NASA changing the landing site for Apollo 17 to go to a spot that I had picked out, which I thought was kind of neat. We were looking. The moon is an interesting thing. It's very, very old, same age as the Earth. In fact, it probably came out of the Earth. I think that's what they're beginning to think more and more. So it went through a cooling period, just like the Earth did. It developed a mantle, but there was still some volcanic activity. And my job was to sort out the volcanic features from the meteor impact features and try and provide some context for that. There are several. In fact, the area where we landed had the rill. The rill itself is an old lava flow that came down from the mountain and carved out a trench in the surface. Any linear feature on the moon is called a rill. And the one that we landed, that Dave and Jim landed next to, was what we call a collapsed lava tube. And a long linear. The difference between the gravity on Earth and the gravity on the moon is pretty spectacular. Lava tube here on Earth would be 35, 40 feet in diameter, but on the moon it was 700 feet across. And that's probably due to the difference in gravity. So there's some pretty spectacular features on the moon. Being isolated and that Guinness record of being the most isolated man in history, I can't verify. I don't know. They say that there was at a point where I was further away from the guys on the surface than anybody else. I don't know. That could be.
Do you ever yearn for that peace again?
Oh yeah, I liked the peace and quiet that I had when I was by myself, even though I had a lot to do. But it was a lot easier to get things done without two other guys getting in the way. So I quite enjoyed the time by myself. Had a good time.
Have your feelings for or about our planet today changed from those you had when you looked at Earth from a long, long way away?
Not so much about the Earth. The Earth is a pretty finite piece of material stuck in solar orbit. It hasn't changed in billions of years. I had a greater reaction to looking at the universe the other way because I think that's quite a bit more spectacular. When you look at the universe through the atmosphere, you see a certain number of stars. Stars that are dimmer, let's say, or less bright, get absorbed in the atmosphere and you don't see them. So there's a limited number of stars that you can see through the atmosphere. But when you're around the moon, in a part of the orbit where you're shadowed from both the sun and the earth, you see them all. There's nothing to attenuate the light coming in. And so what I saw was a sheet of light, not an individual star, which I found absolutely amazing. And it made me think more about our place in the universe than just looking at the Earth. If you look at the Earth, you're kind of restricted to just the solar system. If you look at the universe out there and you realize how far away those stars are, and you realize how many of them there are, then you get a little different perspective on what this is all about.
Did you feel very small?
Oh yeah, and it's absolutely unbelievable. If you look in the night sky and you look at the Milky Way galaxy, it's a wash of light, and you see individual stars and all that. But I don't think very many of us realize how many stars there are in the Milky Way. And there's like 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and then you find out that there are another couple 100 billion galaxies out there that we see as points of light because they're so far away. But they're probably about the same size as the Milky Way. So you start multiplying all those numbers out, and you get to a number that nobody can comprehend. But you realize that the probability of planetary systems around stars the size of the sun is going to be a positive number. And there's going to be a positive number of those planets around those stars that are going to be Earth-like. They'll have an atmosphere, have water, and all the things we need for life. So it becomes pretty inescapable if you really look at the universe out there and you really contemplate what it's all about. That there's going to be a planet out there with people living on it like us. And if you read Carl Sagan, he's very clear in making the statement that there's absolutely no question in his mind anyway that there are intelligent people living out there. But you have to understand that depending on the size of the planet they live on, they're going to be different from us. If the planet is smaller and less gravity, they're going to grow tall and thin. If the planet that they live on is higher gravity than what we have, they're probably going to be shorter and thicker and more muscular. So we are a function of our heritage, but we're also a function of the environment in which we live. And the Earth has a certain specific gravity which makes us what we are today. If the gravity were different, we'd look different.
Well, talking of education, as you know, the Stephen Hawking Foundation is funding space camps for young children in English schools, particularly in the north of England at the moment, and we want to take it out much further. What message would you have for 8, 9, 10-year-old children who are going off to space camps and they dream of travelling into space and learning about space? What message would you give to them?
Well, I think for young people, they need to turn that dream of going into space into something concrete in terms of education. If they're really serious about going into space, they need to be prepared for it. I am a proponent of STEM education, and I believe that the age group that needs that motivation is in middle school, not high school and not college, because once they get to college, they already know what they want to do. So I believe that we need to focus on those kids, the 8 to 12 group, or maybe a little more. And the more we can get them into something like Space Camp, the more we're going to get them thinking about STEM courses, because they're going to realize that the only way we can go into space is through science, technology, and engineering. And hopefully that will turn a lot of these students into STEM students later on. And I believe that's critical for the Western world. In the United States, we graduate every year about 10% of the engineers that China does. And that does not bode well for us unless we can get more students into the STEM courses. And that tide is beginning to turn. It was over the past 8 years in our country, we really slipped into the liberal social side of things. And so the hard courses, the math and engineering and science courses, were taking a back seat to the liberal courses like political science and that kind of thing. And I think we can see that that's beginning to turn around. And to me, that's a hopeful sign. I like to tell young students, it's great to think about going into space, but you will never find an attorney who can build a spacecraft. Okay, so if you're an attorney or an accountant or a doctor or anything like that, political scientist, you're not going to be the one to build a spacecraft. It's going to be those who have engineering and science degrees that are going to do that. So it's important to focus on the science and engineering when you're young.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
It's
my
been great
pleasure.
to meet you, and thanks for your support for Stephen Hawking Foundation. I know they really appreciate
You
it,
bet.
and Lucy's very grateful. So
Absolutely my pleasure. Do
thank
anything
you.
I can to help.